Rome. We're going to begin by working very quickly through a section from a textbook about the rise of Rome. Runs all the way through an overview of the emperors. And we are going to answer the essential questions in this section to give a summary of all the things that happened in the development of this civilization. The material we're working with begins with the legend of Romulus and Remus, goes through the development of Rome as a republic, and moves on through the Punic Wars and the development of the empire. We'll stop when Rome reaches its greatest extent. You might recognize this map if you have gone to Jetpunk and tried to identify the current places that are parts of the Roman Empire. Here we have Italy, where Rome begins in the city here, and we then have the yellow shading Rome as an empire at its fullest extent. You are welcome to read the story of Caesar's assassination, which begins the segment in this textbook. Caesar is also a possible project topic. Here we have the goddess Roma in a statue, and this statue looks a bit different from Greek statues. If you looked carefully at Greek statues, these statues are a bit sturdier. Of course, we begin with the geography of Rome. Everybody's textbook begins with the geography of Rome. The first question, though, is what is the early history of Rome? And so, you may answer this essential question either in Seesaw by pausing and going there, or creating a Google Doc. The history of Rome begins with the overthrow of foreign kings in 509 BC. But the Romans like to date the history of their city to 753 BC. That is when a legendary hero called Romulus is said to have founded Rome. A legend is a popular story from earlier times that cannot be proved. And I put the definition in a text box over here as well. We had some issues I saw with what is a legend. Usually a legend has a grain of truth, so it's not totally made up. But this legend about Romulus and Remus has some details that stretch the imagination. The legend about Rome's founding proper begins with Aeneas, who is a hero of the Trojan War. We talked about the Trojan War in Greece, and we know about the Aeneas because Virgil, a Roman poet, wrote an epic poem called the Aeneid. He wrote that poem in order to glorify Augustus and Rome. So he wanted to connect the history of Rome to Troy, this very questionable sort of a connection. And in fact, before he died, Virgil wanted to burn his poem, but it survived, and we know about Aeneas. Here we have Palatine Hill, and in time this is where the wealthy Romans lived. So, from Aeneas we get to Romulus and Remus, the descendants of Aeneas, according to some versions. They were abandoned by their mother, but rescued by a wolf. When the twins grew up, they decided to found a city, but fought over its location. Romulus killed his brother and traced Rome's boundary around the Palatine Hill. After Romulus, a series of Roman kings ruled the city. Sometime in the 600s BC, however, the Etruscans conquered Rome. The Etruscans were a people from northern Italy, but the Romans wanted self-rule. In 509 BC, they overthrew the Etruscan king, that was Tarquinius Superbus, who was a cruel and tyrannical ruler. Okay, so the Romans overthrew the Etruscan king and formed a republic, which is a government where people elect their leaders, and we will look into that a bit more soon. So stop now and think about how you're going to summarize your answer to the question, what is the early history of Rome? The next essential question asks, why was Rome's location so favorable? After the overthrow of the Etruscans, Rome grew from a city into a country and then into a vast empire. Its location helped make this growth possible. In reality, people founded Rome, not figures from legend. The first settlers of Rome were the Latins. They came from a region surrounding Rome. They chose the spot for its mild climate, good farmland, and strategic location. The Latins and later settlers built Rome on 7 steep hills. As you see here, they are on the map on the right. During the day, settlers farmed the fertile plain at the base of the hills. Why was the plain fertile? Why, here is the Tiber River. At night, they returned to their hilltop homes, from which they could defend themselves against enemy attack. Rome had other advantages. It was located a short distance from the Mediterranean Sea, on several ancient trade routes. It also lay next to the Tiber River, as you learned in the geography feature above. This river played an important role in Rome's development. Italian Peninsula. Rome's location on the Italian peninsula also played an important role in its development. The peninsula stretches south from Europe into the Mediterranean Sea. A peninsula, you will remember from Greece, is a piece of land surrounded on 3 sides by water. As you can see on the map on page 427, that was the one we looked at where I said you would remember jet pump. The Italian peninsula is shaped like a boot. Its heel points toward Greece, while its toe points across the sea to Africa. Italy's location on the Mediterranean made it relatively easy for Roman ships to reach the other lands around the sea. This position made it easier for Rome to eventually conquer and gain new territories. It also helped the development of trade routes. The 2 main mountain ranges of Italy helped protect Rome. The Alps border Italy on the north, and the Apennines form Italy's spine. But Italy's mountains didn't separate early settlements the way mountains of Greece did. Italy also had more large plains than Greece. This made farming easier. So think and go back and answer the next question. Why was Rome's location so favorable? Lives of early Romans. What was life like for the early Romans? Like many ancient peoples, the early Romans lived by farming. But even though the land was fertile, life on a Roman farm was not easy. Most early Romans worked small plots of land. They planted grains such as wheat and barley. They also grew beans, vegetables, and fruit. Later they learned to grow olives and grapes. They also raised pigs, sheep, goats, and chickens. They used oxen to pull their plows. Farmers who owned land also served in the army. In fact, for a time, only landowners were allowed to join the army. Roman leaders believed that property owners would fight harder to defend the city. Landowners were also able to pay for their own military equipment. Over time, some farmers grew richer than others. They bought more land and built larger farms or estates. A gap developed between small farmers and the owners of the estates. This gap would later produce divisions in Roman politics and government. Farm life. At first, most Roman farmers lived in simple homes made of mud or timber. They did not have much furniture. In addition, the farmers lived in extended families. This large family group might have included grandparents, aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews and cousins. The members of the Roman farm family had to work very hard. They farmed the land with simple tools and fetched water from a well or nearby spring. The small amount of land on most farms had to produce enough food to feed the family. This meant that everyone had to be disciplined about his or her responsibilities. The qualities of discipline, loyalty, and hard work that these early farmers developed would help Rome succeed. They were the qualities that made Roman armies so successful. When soldiers went to war, they had to obey orders and do their jobs. This attitude would help Rome conquer all of Italy. So, back to, what was life like for the early Romans? What did they say was particularly important here in developing discipline? Now we'll talk about the Roman Republic. The question we first ask is, how was Roman society structured? As Rome developed into complex civilization, two classes arose. Inequalities between them would lead to conflict. This conflict, however, would eventually define Roman citizenship and the rights of citizens under Roman law. Patricians and plebeians. The upper-class patricians were wealthy landowners who held all of the highest positions in government. The plebeians were mostly common farmers. Like all male Roman citizens, they could vote, but they couldn't hold important government positions. Resentment over the patricians' power caused tension. Finally, the patricians passed a written constitution called the 12 Tables. The 12 Tables, around 450 BC. The 12 Tables established basic rights and duties for Roman citizens. Who else published laws way back in Mesopotamia? Really, what you need to do is pause and answer the question, how was Roman society structured?